I am making my raspberry rose filled donuts. To get started, I'm gonna make my dough. I'm gonna grab a 1/4 cup of warm water, and then I'll combine it with some milk that I have heating up here to about 105 to 110 degrees. That is the optimum temperature for getting yeast to proof. And then I'll add a packet of dry active yeast, and then a teaspoon of sugar will help the yeast proof. I'll swirl this around, and then I'm gonna let it sit for about 5 minutes until it gets foamy on top. And then that's how I know that the yeast is activated. Meanwhile, I'll combine my dry ingredients. I'll add 3½ cups of flour to the bowl of my stand mixer. And then I'll also add a 1/4 cup of sugar. And then I'll add 1 teaspoon of kosher salt. And I'm gonna flavor this dough with a 1/2 teaspoon of cinnamon, a 1/4 teaspoon of ground cardamom. And now I'm gonna add the zest of 1/2 an orange. And the cardamom and the orange and the cinnamon together just scream the holidays. That'll do. And now I'm gonna mix up my eggs. I'm gonna use 1 large egg and 2 egg yolks, which will make this dough extra rich. And now I'm gonna add 1 teaspoon of vanilla. I'll give this a little mix. Now I'm gonna combine my flour mixture, my egg mixture, and my yeast mixture. As you can see, it's gotten nice and foamy. Once this comes together into a stiff dough, I'm gonna start to add some softened butter. I'm gonna add 6 tablespoons of butter, 1 tablespoon at a time, letting it get mostly incorporated before I add each tablespoon. And this is gonna make the dough so moist and good. This is a supermodel dough. It is gorgeous. Okay, I think this dough is ready. I'm gonna form it into a ball, and then I'm gonna let it rise. I'll grab a clean bowl. I'm gonna coat the bowl with oil so that the dough doesn't stick. And I'll add the dough face down so I can zhuzh it around in the oil so that the whole ball of dough is coated. And then I'll flip it over, and now I'm gonna cover it with plastic wrap. So now this is gonna rise in the refrigerator for 8 hours. I've got my buttery donut dough that I made earlier, and I'm gonna turn it out onto my surface. I'll dust it with a little flour, and then I'll roll it out to a 1/2 inch thick. And now I'm gonna cut out 2½ inch circles using my biscuit cutter. I've lined this with parchment so that the dough doesn't stick. Now these are gonna rise for another hour or so until they've doubled in size. I'll just add my raspberry jam to my bowl. And now I'm gonna add a splash of rose water. Just a little bit will give me that floral note that I love. And now I'll just mix it until it's combined. And I'll pour it in. Okay, I'm ready to fry my donuts. These donuts are perfectly puffy. They are ready to fry. I've got some oil heating up in my pot. It's heating up to 350 degrees, and it's a few inches of oil. And I always like heating in cast iron because it holds the heat really well. And now I'm gonna fry my donuts in batches for about 1.5 minutes on each side until golden. I'll gently lower these in, and I can already see that the bottoms are starting to turn golden. I'm gonna transfer them to a wire rack so that any excess oil can drip off. And then I'm gonna spread a little bit of my glaze right on top. I'll go almost to the edge. First, I'm gonna grab a long pointy knife so that I can get a hole in the top, just to make space for the jam. And I like filling my donuts from the top down. I love the way it looks, and it also holds the jam. And now I'll grab my piping bag and fill the hole with my raspberry rose filling. And now I'm gonna sprinkle on some dried rose petals. These will add an extra special little touch on top. I'll stick these right on.
It is my peppermint skillet cake with peppermint ice cream. We're using a box mix. So get your favorite brand right into your standing mixer. You can use the hand mixer for this too. But it's always feels more like the holidays when you bring out the big guns, doesn't it? Right? I love it. And we're gonna make this a whiter cake. So 3 egg whites right in here. Literally dump and mix. We're gonna do a cup of water, the good stuff for you, Jeffrey. I know you like that nice organic water. I imported this from France. That's on the house, buddy. Okay, I'm gonna do a little extra for you. And then a 1/3 cup of oil. And we are going to add our first application of peppermint flavor, and that is with peppermint extract. You can find this by the vanillas extracts, by the almond extracts. Really good, right? Gives it that kind of, you know, just that blast of peppermint flavor we love. So about 2 minutes in here. Always start it slow. We are good to go here. We got our oven preheating, of course, at 350 per the box mix. So you do want to follow the box that you choose to purchase, right? To kind of to a T, right? Put whatever add-ins you want in there, but ultimately the box mix will dictate the temperature and the time and the ingredients. Keep that in mind. A little nonstick spray in a cast iron skillet. This is a 10-inch. If you have a 12-inch, it's just not going to give you a nice dramatic dome. So a 10-inch is perfect. But again, if you want to use your 10-inch cake pan, an 8-inch cake pan, you can as well. Just make sure if you are using the skillet or cake pan, liberally spray it with nonstick. So just when you scoop it into a wedge, it comes right out because we're serving that in this festive skillet. Look at that beautiful white, right? We use the egg whites, not the whole eggs. The whole eggs give you a yellower color, right? A little more richness. This is going to be a little fluffier.
Oh, yeah, it is white.
Isn't it cool? Look at that. I love that about box mixes. You can kind of, you know, improvise, right? As long as if you're not adding too much liquid, right? Or other sugar elements that might melt in there. This is going in the oven about 30, 35 minutes till we pull out a cake tester. Nice and dry, but maybe a little moisture on there, and then the rest will kind of cook in this skillet. Keep an eye on it, right? Do not overbake this cake. You want it super moist and super ready to go. While that's cooking, let's start making our frosting. Okay, I am creaming my butter for my buttercream peppermint frosting. Nice, light and fluffy, lightened in color. We're gonna add some sifted powdered sugar, obviously carefully, but sometimes there's really no super gentle way. Look at that. Oh, I'm doing good, hon. So you sift it so you don't get the clumps in there, right? Real important step. I got some heavy cream. You know, add it maybe a teaspoon, maybe 2 teaspoons just to get it started. We're gonna start with like 1, maybe deuce, right? And a little peppermint extract. Again, the second application of our peppermint flavor. What I did as well a minute ago was I took a decent amount of candy canes, let's say 12 to 14, and I pulverized them in my food processor, made this kind of peppermint dust here.
The blue mixer is so festive.
Isn't it? And blue's not a traditional
I think it's
Christmas
becoming
color,
more popular.
but it is a holiday color, Hanukkah color too. All right, we are good to go. I don't need any more. Let's just check the consistency. Oh, very spreadable. I can't lie. I got to bump it up one more notch and put about half of this pulverized candy cane in the frosting. Sarah, you got to get in close on there. Look how pretty that is.
Oh, it's pink.
Right?
The best. I think that's the best holiday color, actually.
Just want to fold this in so you don't compromise, you know, the little crunch of that candy cane. So cute, right? Here we go. We'll save the rest for garnish. Beautiful. We'll take this guy off. We got everything good to go. Our cake has properly cooled. So look at that beautiful golden brown, slightly domed top, right? Just making sure, right, before we start frosting it and putting all this, look at clean, clear, comes right out, super soft, right? We tested it, right? With the little, you use a toothpick, we got a little cake thermometer, it comes out nice and clean. Little clingies to that is okay. Remember, when it sits in this really hot, you know, skillet that's enveloping, you know, 75% of this cake, it's gonna continue to cook on your stovetop. So you wanna allow ample time, but let's start frosting, which is, you know, Sarah's usually the one for this job, don't you think?
Mm-hmm.
So just go free form, right? Okay, one more thing, give it a nice dusting of some more pulverized candy cane. How festive is this? Right out of that old-timey Rudolph the Red-Nosed Reindeer. That's what he'd be eating. Just make sure you have a sidecar of peppermint ice cream right there. Sarah, you are gonna help me taste this. Come on, you know I love a box mix too. I am never hating on a box mix, ever. Oh, dude, don't neglect to spray that skillet too, okay? Because you're gonna see in a minute, We take that little offset and it comes so cleanly right out of there. Sarah, oh man, it smells so delectably box mixy. It's like almost too moist. How's that crumb look on there?
Wow.
Does it look, it's like shiny.
And it is very white.
Yep.
That's a good trick.
The box mixes, so. Oh man, it's like saucer. That's how you know it's good ice cream. Oh man. Oh man. All right. And then a little more on there for you, babe. And that's all you need. Look at that.
I smell it.
I'm gonna try the cake on its own first. I'd rather have this any day than a fancy bakery cake.
My version here of eggnog is actually missing the eggs, and I think for the most part, we like that. Katie, you're gonna whip some cream, which is gonna be a substitute for those whipped egg whites. And eggnog is essentially a milk punch, right? It's an alcoholic milk punch, as we call it. So here I've warmed 2 cups of sugar with 1.5 cups of milk, just enough to dissolve the sugar. Now to that, I'm gonna add a cup of cold milk.
Okay, cold
and
milk.
a cup of cold cream.
Cold cream. Okay, cold cream.
1/4 teaspoon of nutmeg and allspice. In the base here with a tablespoon of vanilla.
Wow.
Sorry, I feel so loud.
I know. I really wish I could hear what Alex is saying.
And 1/2 teaspoon of cinnamon and ginger. And we whisk. Don't be afraid to whisk it to froth it up a little bit. And we've got the cream that Katie is lovingly frothing. Now to that. I'm gonna go pretty traditional rum.
Rum?
2 cups of rum.
Is that traditional?
More traditional, yeah. It's actually, Jeffrey, I actually did some reading about eggnog because I was trying to figure out why you could make eggnog with rum, with whiskey, with bourbon. Apparently, after the American Revolutionary War, liquor from foreign lands like rum was heavily taxed. So in America, we turned to bourbon.
I love the bourbon.
Of course,
I'm looking forward to the rum.
Perfecto.
Oh, wow. It was all worth it.
Katie, you know what?
Worth all the
worth the racket.
You're the best sous chef.
That's all the Christmas present I need was that acknowledgement.
You really are.
It's good to feel seen, Alex.
Exactly.
You are seen, Katie. All right, so we add that whipped cream right in there, and that kind of functions like the egg whites would have.
It's a good thickener.
Yeah, gives it a little body.
6 ounces, and you need it.
You're good.
I keep it in the fridge and I use it as creamer for my coffee.
That's my girl.
That's a great.
Little orange zest in there. Now,
that
and this
too.
goes right. You got to have some kind of fancy pants.
So
Look
you
at
put it on
that.
ice, or is it?
Look how pretty this is in this beautiful eggnog punch bowl.
Carefully, I don't want to splatter on your
That's
cashmere.
okay.
All right.
It does smell delicious.
This is holidays.
Yeah, and yeah, ideally, you know what, Jeffrey?
Yes?
Quite honestly, I would pop this in the fridge to chill up more for a few hours. And then a little more, just straight nutmeg right on top. Ideally grated from whole.
the nut.
You really, this is one place where I think you want that kind of bitterness, almost the chew and the tooth of the nutmeg on there.
Like nobody does this. It's
This is
so
so
traditional,
festive.
so beautiful.
And then you come over to the bowl and you put your nose there and you just get this holiday nutmeg thing. And I think the nutmeg cuts a little bit of the sugar in the most beautiful way.
Yeah.
Look at that.
Look at you.
Couple cups of rum in here. You can make it with bourbon, whiskey. I think the word nog from eggnog originally meant strong ale.
Oh, really?
So I think you can pretty much get in anywhere here.
Whoa. Well,
Yeah, Jeffrey,
My nose
this
is nodding
just
right
the little
now, just
nightcap
smelling it.
that you need for your day. You'd better serve yourself
Oh, wow.
than trying
is
to get
good?
that to freeze.
I'm missing no egg because this is full nog, bro.
You know, there might be 2 cups of rum in there, but I'm not feeling like it's too strong. This is the perfect holiday drink.
Mini gingerbread farmhouses, which are a little puffier and softer than your average gingerbread foundation, so they're good for both building and eating. You get the best of both worlds. For the cookie dough, I'll start with my dry ingredients. I have 6 cups of all-purpose flour in my big bowl here. Of course, you have to have ginger. I'll add 4 teaspoons, 2 tablespoons of ground cinnamon, 1/2 teaspoon each of ground cloves and freshly grated nutmeg. For my leaveners, I've got 1 teaspoon of baking soda in here and also 1.5 teaspoons of baking powder. I'll season with a teaspoon of salt, I'll whisk this to both combine and also waft some smells up into my nose. My dry ingredients are well combined. I have 1.5 cups of softened unsalted butter. I'll combine it with 1.5 cups of dark brown sugar. I'll get this on my stand mixer and beat it for a couple of minutes until it's pale and fluffy. I'll crack in my 2 eggs, one at a time, just to ensure that they're incorporating smoothly. I'll eyeball in 2 teaspoons of vanilla extract, and then necessary ingredient for any gingerbread, molasses. I'm adding 1 cup. You see those dark, sweet notes, that gorgeous dark brown signature gingerbread color. I'll gradually add my dry ingredients. I'll divide my dough in half. It'll make it easier to roll out and cut out my shape. And then stick these in the fridge to firm up for an hour. My dough is chilled and I'm ready to roll. My counter is dusted with flour to make sure that the dough doesn't stick. Dust the top with some flour. And then I'll roll this out until it's a 1/4 inch thick. Okay, this looks great. I've got my cookie cutter here. It's a 3-inch square, and I'm gonna use squares for both the sides of the house as well as the roof. I will transfer these now to my baking sheets and then bake at 350 degrees for 12 to 14 minutes until they're slightly puffed and a little bit browned on the bottom. And while they bake, I'll grab my mom to help me decorate. Granny Jody is here, the cookies are cooled, and we're ready to decorate. So we're gonna build 2 mini farmhouses. You have 2 piping bags. Okay. The white one is royal icing. That is the glue that is gonna hold the houses together. You just whip egg whites until they're frothy and starting to turn white, then add loads of powdered sugar and put it in piping bags fitted with round tips, sealed away from the air so that it doesn't dry out. So we'll first get the roof going. I'll pipe a fat line of royal icing along the edge and then stick on another piece for the roof. And then we'll let this set. You can get going on the walls and then add 2 more walls. It's really nice. We can decorate a few to eat, but royal icing is not that great to eat. So we also have classic American buttercream.
Oh, so we can decorate them and eat them now?
Yeah.
What? Mmm. This is so good.
All right, let's build.
Okay.
To finish these off, we'll attach our roofs and decorate with an assortment of candies.
This is so much fun. This brings back such great memories. That's beautiful.
Dun, da, da, da.
Ta-da. Why, thank you.
Every gingerbread house needs a snowstorm of shredded coconut. Merry Christmas to us.
Merry Christmas.
And may a vacuum cleaner come down the chimney.
Hey everybody, today we're gonna make a gingerbread cake with snow sugar. We're gonna jump right in. The first thing that I've done is preheated my oven to 375 degrees. This cake is gonna come together really quickly and you wanna make sure that your oven is ready to receive your deliciousness. The other thing is we're gonna make sure that our butter is at room temperature. Let's go. I need 3 whole eggs. Make sure your eggs are at room temperature. 1, a 2, a 3. Now I need 2 egg yolks. The best tool is what? Hey. So, make sure your hands are clean, no oil, no lotion. You see how easy that is? If you get a shell in your eggs, then use the shell to get it out. All right, now I'm just gonna whisk those up. I'm gonna add in some vanilla. I just wanna make sure that the yolks are all mixed up. And a lot of times you will see recipes where you're adding extra yolks. You just wanna add extra fat without the water from the whites. And now I'm gonna add my molasses. One of the tricks of getting your molasses out, you can always use oil spray to spray into your bowl and it will just slip right on out. I love the smell of molasses. All right, you see that looks all good? It looks like it's all together, homogenized. Now we're gonna do our buttermilk mixture. Adding water to your cakes makes them really moist. Simple, simple, simple. And I can use the same whisk. Now I'm gonna put together my dry mixture. It's all about the spice. I have cinnamon, ginger, nutmeg, and cloves. And then I'm gonna add my sifted cake flour. Let's talk about cake flour. Cake flour has less gluten than all-purpose flour. It will give you a lighter cake. So if you don't have cake flour, you can sometimes take all-purpose flour and cornstarch. So go ahead and look up a recipe so that you can see what the ratio is and you can get it done. All right. Well, I'm adding baking powder and salt. All right, and here we have our spices. We've got our cake flour, we've got our baking powder, and we have our salt. And now I'm gonna add the sugar. And you will see that this is a different method of actually making a cake. A lot of times people think that they're gonna take the butter and cream it with the sugar, but I'm doing a reverse method. So I'm using dark brown sugar because dark brown sugar has more molasses in it. And that's what makes it the light and dark. So you can make your own brown sugar by taking regular granulated sugar and adding molasses. I like using my hands because I'm mixing up the brown sugar until I don't feel any lumps. Next, we're adding the fat. I'm gonna put on a glove. I specifically chose this method to use my hands or to not use a stand mixer because everybody doesn't have a stand mixer. And the reason you do this is because you're not overdeveloping the gluten, so it produces a really tender cake that is moist and delicious, and it has a really nice crumb. We talk a lot about vegetable oil cakes when you're making a cake. The butter is going to add the flavor, but if you have vegetable oil, it's going to be very tender at room temperature. All right, I think this looks good. Does that look good? It smells amazing, and it's just all sandy. And now we're gonna add in the liquids. Okay, I'm gonna add in the molasses mixture. I like to work with a stiff spatula when I'm doing things by hand. And I do this little hash motion. It's not quite folding, but I just wanna make sure everything gets incorporated. So here's my buttermilk mixture. Okay, let me beat this. This gives you a little workout. Just beating it until it's nice and smooth. All right. So now what I have 2 loaf pans that I've prepared. It's oiled, parchment paper, and then oiled again. And I have the extended collar here so that when the cake bakes, I can just lift it out and let the cake cool. So I'm gonna divide my batter into these pans. And I know it seems loose, but it's gonna be perfectly fine. If you want, you can also use a cup measure so that you can do things more exacting. All right, so last little bit, we have chopped up candied ginger, which is gonna add not only freshness, not only texture and chew, but also that intense ginger flavor. So this is gonna be so good. And some of these pieces are gonna fall in the middle of the cake, so you're gonna get all of that ginger chew throughout. So there's ginger on top of ginger. I love ginger. All right, into the oven we go. And we know it'll be done when a toothpick goes into the center, it comes out clean. It's gonna take about 25 to 30 minutes. But let your nose determine. All right, everybody, we're gonna make our snow sugar now. We have our granulated sugar in the bowl. We're adding cornstarch. And now we're gonna add coconut oil. So you're probably thinking, why are we doing this? We're doing this because we don't want granulated sugar. We don't want powdered sugar. And adding the coconut oil gives us something in between. So we're gonna mix this up and we're gonna put it in the refrigerator for about 5 to 10 minutes. Okay, see that? So easy. So this is our snow sugar. You can see how there are some lumps and clumps in there, which is fine, it's perfect. It is ready to be sifted. I'm taking a fine mesh strainer and I'm gonna put my sugar into the fine mesh strainer. You ready? Now we're gonna make it rain. Look at that. I also can see that somebody may wanna put some color in the sugar. And honestly, while you're at it, if you wanna add a flavor, but it is so simple and so beautiful. Look at that. Wouldn't you want this on your holiday table? Now to cut. All I want is for people to saw. Just saw the cake. Don't mash the cake. You saw the cake so that you have a nice edge. Ready for the big reveal? Look at that. Some for myself. It's a little thick because, you know, who doesn't like gingerbread? It is so moist and light. It is tender, the aroma, but you can't just smell it. Dude, if you can't compliment yourself, why are you making it?
Peppermint Latke ice cream sundaes. These are a variation on the latkes that I make every year for Hanukkah, and they're inspired by that really delicious thing where you dip your fries in the milkshake. So it's that delicious combination of salty and sweet, and I think you're gonna love them. If you're cooking along with me, get the shredding attachment hooked up to your food processor, and then also have some cheesecloth sitting in a strainer that's set above a bowl. Let's get started. Put the top on your food processor, and now we're gonna shred up our russet potatoes, and I don't even peel them. The peel looks really pretty, and it's fiber, and it's easier if you just skip the peeling. And if you don't have a food processor with a shredder attachment, you could also grate these by hand on the big holes of a box grater or use a mandolin. I just use a food processor because it is so darn quick and easy. Now, once all of your potatoes are shredded, you can dump the potatoes into the cheesecloth lined strainer. How pretty do your potatoes look? I love these big, thick strands of shredded potato. So dump the potatoes right in. And now I want you to sprinkle with a few good pinches of kosher salt. And what the salt is gonna do is it's gonna draw out the moisture in the potato strands, and that moisture is gonna fall down to the bowl. And drawing the moisture out of the potatoes is gonna help get a crispy latke. So for me, the ideal latke is crispy on the outside and still a little bit soft and creamy on the inside. And so in order to get that creaminess, I do not want you to skip this step. I also want you to grab your lemon. Adding lemon juice to this mixture is gonna prevent the potatoes from oxidizing and turning that weird grayish brownish color. So give it a roll, which will help release its juices, and then cut it in half and squeeze it right over the potatoes. And you can put your hand underneath when you're squeezing it to catch any of the lemon seeds. And just let the juice fall through your fingers. And you can toss the potatoes around to make sure that the salt and the lemon juice gets evenly distributed. And then let this sit for a bit to allow that moisture to come out. Now, as your potato mixture is sitting, you can get your oil heating up. So get a nice large frying pan heating up over medium-high, and then add a thick layer of oil, about a 1/4 inch thick. And I'm using just a neutrally flavored oil here, any that has a high smoke point. So canola oil or vegetable oil will work. And when I was little, I was never patient enough to let the oil heat up. And you know where that got me? It got me really soggy, oily latkes. You don't want that. You want your oil to be hot enough so that it fries your latkes up really nice and crispy. So gather the cheesecloth by the ends and use your hands to squeeze out any of that excess moisture. You see all that coming out of there? We're earning our latkes. Once you've squeezed out as much moisture as you can, get rid of it, and then we're gonna use this same bowl to mix up the rest of our mixture. So add the potato mixture to the bowl. And then grab your 2 eggs and these are gonna help the latke mixture stay together. And then also add 1/3 cup of flour. And this will also help the mixture stay all together. And now mix it up. So latkes are the quintessential Hanukkah food. On Hanukkah, it's tradition to eat foods that are fried in oil to commemorate the miracle of Hanukkah. Traditionally, latkes are served with sour cream and applesauce, but there's 8 nights of Hanukkah, and so usually by the 8th night, I'm looking for other fun ways to eat my latkes. And that's when I came up with this latke sundae. Once your mixture is combined, you can test to see if your oil is hot enough, and to do that, grab 1 strand of the potato and then add it to the oil, and if it sizzles, it's ready. That's a nice little sizzle. I think we're ready. Grab an ice cream scoop. And I like using an ice cream scoop because it's easier to portion out the latkes so that they're all evenly sized. And then cram your mixture into a scoop. And then gently add to the pan. We'll do a few more and fry these in batches. It's important not to overcrowd the pan because if you do, it'll lower the temperature of the oil and then it'll make your latkes taste oily and soggy. Grab your spatula. You can use your spatula to flatten them out slightly. Don't flatten them out too much because a thick latke is a good latke. I like about a 1/2 inch thick of a latke. Now once these are all flattened out, you're gonna let these fry on both sides until they're golden brown and crispy. So a few minutes on each side. So if you guys are hosting big parties this year for the holidays, latkes are actually the type of thing that can be prepped ahead. What you want to do is once you're done frying your latkes, transfer them directly to a pan that's lined with foil. You don't want that excess oil to drip off. You want to keep it. What you do is you put the latkes in the refrigerator or the freezer until it's party time, and then when it's party time, reheat them in the oven, and that excess oil will actually re-fry the edges of the latkes and make them hot and crispy again. The hardest part for me in this recipe is being patient and letting the latkes get golden and crispy. It's always worth it. So don't fuss with them too much. Just let them do their magic. So when you have a beautiful brown color on the bottom of your latke, you can carefully flip it over and get that same gorgeous color on the other side. Ah, how perfect is that? Do yours look nice and golden brown? I hope so. These look gorgeous, and now we're gonna let these cook for a few minutes on the other side until they're just as golden. These have reached peak crispiness on both sides. They're ready to come out of the pan. And transferring them to a wire rack is gonna allow any excess oil to drip off, and it's gonna help keep them crispy on the bottom. Oh, these look delicious. I hope yours do too. I've got enough latkes here to make our sundae, but if you want to make more, press pause now, keep on frying in batches, and then meet back up when you're ready. It's time to assemble. Grab your chocolate ice cream, or any flavor of ice cream will do, and some chocolate sauce, whipped cream, all of your favorite sundae toppings. I'm very excited to eat these. I hope you are too. So, to assemble, put a couple of latkes on a plate. Grab an ice cream scoop. And add a big scoop of ice cream onto each latke. And you gotta work fast because you want the latkes to stay hot and the ice cream to stay cold. Get some whipped cream on there. Oh yeah, it works. Chocolate sauce. Nice drizzly drizz. And peppermint around the holidays is gorgeous and perfect, and it adds great crunch. So sprinkle a few of those on there as well. How pretty are these? The unicorn of all holiday desserts, my peppermint Latke ice cream sundae. I'm gonna dig in right now. These get a little messy in the best way possible. It's so good. They're salty and crispy and creamy and sweet. I love these a Latke, and I hope you do too.
An ugly sweater cake. I already made the cake, and I'm also gonna make it easy because I'm using ready-made icing. So I put 2 pots of vanilla frosting, bought at the supermarket in little tubs, and I put them into this bowl with some green gel food coloring. Okay, I'm gonna keep mixing until this icing is the color of green that it is intended to be. Don't go away. So basically, I wanna totally coat this cake in the green frosting. Okay, so now that the canvas of the cake is ready, I'm going to start adding the details. So I'm gonna add, this is, by the way, store-bought icing as well. And I'm basically gonna make a Y shape. And this is supposed to be like the fluffy trim of your Christmas sweater. And then it's just about decorating. I've gotta do buttons for the sweater.
Oh, yeah.
Okay, so I thought it'd be fun to do dark buttons. I'm already loving it. This is like a light strand. And then take bell-shaped candies and just kind of set them straight on the cake. You don't even have to unwrap them. Just kind of decorate to our heart's content here. Look. Isn't that cute? Okay, what about sprinkles?
Yes.
Okay, put one kind of sprinkle on this side. Over here. I'm basically gonna go too far on this and mess it all up. I'm gonna look for a sweater that looks exactly like this.
We are gonna be making Hanukkah donuts for Sufganiyot. So if you're cooking along with me, make sure you have some oil heating up in a pot. You want it to heat to 350 degrees Fahrenheit. Also have a pastry bag fitted with a tip. Anywhere between 1/4 inch to 1/2 inch is good, and it can be a round tip or a star tip. Let's get started. The hardest part, it's opening up a can of store-bought biscuit dough. I'm using these big buttermilk biscuits. The holidays are so busy, so I will take any easy hack like this. We're gonna fry them in multiple batches. We don't wanna overcrowd our pot because the temperature of the oil is gonna drop, and that's actually gonna make your donuts feel oily and greasy, which you don't want. How beautiful is that? So now gently transfer them to your pan. Now let's let these cool for a bit while we make our filling. Dump the cream cheese right into the bowl. We're gonna add some cranberry sauce. Add a nice big plop, and then mix it up. Gonna be delicious. So traditionally, Sufganiyot are filled with jelly. I like bulking it up with cream cheese to add that richness and tanginess and texture. We are ready to fill. Grab your piping bag and plop your filling right in. Twist the top so that the filling doesn't come out the back as you're squeezing. Stick the tip right into the top of the donuts and squeeze. And then you can add a little extra to the top. These are the best when they're fresh. So ideally you should eat these within an hour of them being made. Grab a little sifter like this, and don't be shy with the powdered sugar here. The biscuits aren't really sweet by themselves. Look how pretty that is. There you have it, our cranberry cream cheese stuffed Sufganiyot. They smell so good, and they weren't even that hard to make.
A holiday brownie kit. So I have been browning the butter, and just in the last few seconds, it started to get that beautiful golden nutty color. And I have 2 kinds of chocolate to add at this stage. Chopped bittersweet chocolate and just unsweetened cocoa powder. So it's good to add it when the butter is really sizzly and hot, because then it'll take care of melting the chocolate for you. So I am gonna sweeten things up by adding regular sugar, a whole bunch, and powdered sugar. So now I have 6 eggs to add, and I'm gonna add them one at a time, stirring well after each one. So now it's time for the flour. So when the flour is just about all mixed in, that's when I add the third kind of chocolate, semi-sweet chocolate chips. And I add them toward the end of making the batter because I want them to stay kind of together, and then when the brownies bake, they add just an extra richness and gooiness to the brownies. Okay, so I have a sheet pan that I'm gonna bake the brownies in, and I lined it with parchment and sprayed the parchment paper because I don't want the brownies to stick. Okay, got it all spread out. The brownie batter looks incredible. So now I'm gonna bake the brownies, take them out and let them cool, and make the buttercream. I'll put them in a 350-degree oven for 30 minutes and let them cool. Next, I'll start the buttercream. I'll add 8 cups of powdered sugar to 4 sticks of room temperature salted butter, along with 2 teaspoons of vanilla extract, and beat them until they're smooth and fluffy. Then I'll divide the buttercream between 3 bowls, add green coloring to one, enough to get some really good color, and mix it in. I'll add red food coloring to bowl 2. Again, you want a really strong color. Mix that in. Take a brownie square, get to work with the colored buttercream, and decorate with fun holiday candy and sprinkles. How cute is that?
For a super special Scandinavian Christmas dessert, I'm baking up a recipe that's been in Nick's family for generations. It is the Hagen family bløtkake. It's a Norwegian cream cake that's light and spongy and decorated with fresh whipped cream and berries. It's very celebratory. Okay, I've got my 5 eggs. I'll add 2 cups of sugar and get this onto my mixer. And I'll get this beating for a few good minutes until it's pale and fluffy, which will give the cake nice structure. All right. Okay. Wow, I can't even imagine what a workout it would have been for Nick's ancestors to make this before they had a stand mixer. I'll turn this back on and drizzle in ½ a cup of water. Okay. I'll grab my dry ingredients. This is 2½ cups of all-purpose flour and 2 heaping teaspoons of baking powder. And I'm gonna sift these in, which is important to ensure that there are no lumps of dry ingredients. And some kosher salt, which is the only addition I have made to the original. And I'll fold this all together, being careful not to deflate all the air that I just beat into the eggs. This is such an easy cake to make. It all comes together in one bowl. Doesn't get much better than that. Look at how glossy this is. That's a good cake batter. Pagans, they knew. Okay, ready for the cake pan. I have a 9-inch springform cake pan that I've greased and lined on the bottom with parchment. And the springform one is nice because it's so high. I'm baking this all in one pan, and then when it comes out of the oven, I'll slice it into 2 layers. Look at that. This cake takes a while to bake. I'm gonna start checking it at 1 hour, and I'll know that it's done when it's golden on top and a toothpick stuck into the center comes out clean, and it's gonna bake at 325 degrees. My cake baked up beautifully, and now it's cooling. And now to finish it off, I'll make some vanilla whipped cream. I'll start with 3 cups of heavy cream that's nice and cold. Sweeten it with a 1/4 cup of powdered sugar and splash in some vanilla extract. And I'll beat this to stiff peaks. Okay, looking good. I'll set this aside while I prepare my cranberries. I've got some fresh cranberries here. I'll toss them with some sugar. My cake is cool and ready to assemble. Dun, 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 dun. Hello. I'll carefully cut this into 2 layers. And I'm gonna rotate this as I go, just trying my very best to keep an even line. And as I saw, I'll work my way into the center. And now I'll make a great big cake sandwich with a layer of whipped cream and cranberries in the middle. And then I'll cover the outside with whipped cream and adorn with more cranberries and some fresh rosemary, just because it's pretty. Ah! holidays.
Hot chocolate, and I'm gonna make a whipped cream with some peanut butter. All right, let's make some hot chocolate. So I'm gonna start with 2 cups of half and half and 2 cups of milk. And we're gonna use some milk chocolate and some semi-sweet chocolate. We're just gonna melt it into the milk and the cream. Hot chocolate puts me in a good mood. Reminds me of my childhood. Now I'm gonna make some peanut butter whipped cream. So we're gonna use a cup of heavy cream. We're gonna put it into this cold bowl. And the cold bowl is actually just gonna make the cream get to those stiff peaks a little bit quicker. All right, then I'm gonna take some creamy peanut butter, a couple of tablespoons, and a little bit of vanilla extract. All right, so we have our peanut butter whipped cream. I have some chocolate-covered peanuts. Just chop them. Yum. Now I'm gonna add 3/4 of a cup of milk chocolate and 1/4 of semi-sweet, so it's not too sweet. Pinch of sea salt, just to kind of bring out the flavors of the chocolate itself. And then you wanna let the chocolate melt into the milk and the cream, and we'll have a beautiful hot chocolate. Of course, some peanut butter whipped cream. Some chocolate-covered peanuts. Looks really good. It's like a liquid chocolate peanut butter cup. I just love those flavors together. It's really hot chocolate. The peanut butter whipped cream just kind of cools it down so you can start to drink it right away. I'll drink this throughout the entire meal.
I'm making my Gingersnap Icebox cake. It's rich and creamy, but not too heavy, which is nice after a big meal. To get started, I'll make my go-to Gingersnap recipe. I'll start with 1/2 cup of softened unsalted butter, 3/4 of a cup of sugar. I'll get this beating while I combine my dry ingredients. 2 cups of all-purpose flour, a teaspoon of baking powder, and 1/2 teaspoon of baking soda. And these will help the cookies get light and crispy, which is important for soaking up all of that coconut whip. 1/2 teaspoon of kosher salt, and loads of spices. 1½ teaspoons of cinnamon. Of course, a Gingersnap has to have ginger, so 1½ teaspoons of ground ginger, 1/2 teaspoon of cloves, and 1/2 teaspoon of allspice. All of these together are just gonna make these cookies explode with flavor. So I'll whisk this up. Okay, I'll set these dry ingredients aside and grab an egg and molasses. An egg will hold everything together. I'll add this right into the butter and sugar mixture. 1/3 of a cup of molasses, which helps Gingersnaps get their signature golden color. This molasses smell is reminding me of gingerbread, people. And now that this is combined, I'll gradually add my dry ingredients. The dough is coming together. I can no longer see any dry floury bits. I'm gonna roll it into some logs now. I have a couple of sheets of parchment paper to wrap up the dough. I'll just plop 1/2 of the dough onto my first sheet, and then I'll sort of nudge it into a log shape. And then I'll fold the parchment paper over the dough. Then I'm gonna use my bench scraper to press it into a longer, skinnier log. I'll shape my other log and then stick these in the fridge until they're firm enough to slice. My dough is cold and I'm ready to form my cookies. I'll just unwrap a roll of dough, and I'm gonna make 1/4-inch slices. Just like that. I'll space these out evenly on my sheet trays. I'll keep on slicing these and then bake them at 350 degrees for 10 to 12 minutes until they're super snappy. My Gingersnap cookies are cooling, and now I'm whipping up my coconut cream, which is gonna be the glue that holds this cake together. I start by beating up 2 cans of coconut milk to medium stiff peaks, then add in a little powdered sugar for extra sweetness, some vanilla extract, kosher salt, lime zest for some acidic tang, ground ginger to complement the snaps, and mix everything up until it's fluffy and smooth. Now I'm gonna fold in something that'll really make it sparkle. Candied ginger. It'll be chewy and sweet, just peppered throughout the cake. I'll fold in about 1/2 cup. And get this evenly distributed. And these cookies and this whipped cream are tempting me. Before I assemble the cake, I just need to do this. All of these flavors together and that fluffiness of the cream is just doing it for me. To put this cake together, I've got a loaf pan lined with some parchment paper, and I'll start with a layer of cookies. I'll spread them with a layer of coconut cream. I wanna make sure the cookies are totally covered, and then I'll keep on stacking up layers of cookies and cream. And I'll cover the top with coconut cream. So luxurious. This looks like a cloud. I'm gonna top with the rest of my lime zest. Nature sprinkles. And some toasted coconut for more coconutiness. And I have these big giant flakes. I'll let this set in the fridge for 6 hours. It could also go up to overnight. And the Gingersnaps are gonna get so chewy. I can't wait.
Cute little cheesecake Santa hats. They are all the rage, and I am very excited to take them to Missy's house. Okay, I'm gonna make a crumb crust first. I've already made 1/2 of the crumb mixture. It's such a big batch, I had to split it in 2. I put some vanilla sandwich cookies in a food processor, and I'm just pulsing them up. Okay, they're pretty much broken up. Now I need to dye these reddish pink. So I have a mixture. I started with 2 sticks of butter and a tablespoon of red food dye. And I'm gonna pulse it while I drizzle the other 1/2 of it in. Okay, I got the red color evenly distributed. Now, I wanna mix these with the crumbs that I already made because the second batch of butter had a little bit more dye. So I'm just gonna stir them together and pretend I did them all at once. I'm gonna pour them into a pan. I've got a 9 by 13 inch pan and I lined it with parchment and then really greased the parchment well. I'm gonna use a stainless measuring cup to press the crumbs into the pan. Okay, I need to get the crumbs into the oven. They're gonna bake at 350 degrees for 10 minutes. And while they bake, I'm gonna make the delicious cheesecake mixture. I'll start with 3 packages of softened cream cheese. These are gonna make a lot of Santas. I'm gonna add a 1.5 cups of sugar. And then I'll turn the mixer on and let it start to work. I don't want it to get too complacent. It's the holidays. I'll add a splash of vanilla, about 1.5 teaspoons. Okay, now I'm gonna add 4 eggs one at a time and I'll give each egg a chance to mix in. And in goes the 4th. And the last thing to add is sour cream, about 1/2 cup. Hey, this mixture is good to go. So I am gonna grab those crumbs out of the oven. They smell so good. Now the good news is I don't have to let the crumbs cool because this is gonna go back into the oven. All right, now it goes back into the oven. I have a little bit of a trick though when I make cheesecake. I wanna create some steam in the oven because it just helps it bake more evenly. So I've got some hot water and these 2 pans are gonna go into the oven. The cheesecake goes on the middle rack. And then I'll put the hot water right below it. Okay, I'm gonna let this bake for 45 minutes, and then I have a few more steps before the Santas show up. So the cheesecake bakes for 45 minutes, then I'll turn the oven off, open the door, and leave the pan to sit there for 15 minutes. Then take it out to cool. This takes 2 hours, along with another 2 hours chilling in the fridge. The next step is to remove the cheesecake and get to work with a 2-inch round pastry cutter, carefully punching out circles. These will be the bottom of the little Santa hats. I'll put them on a sheet pan for convenience, and when they're all done, they go back into the fridge. I made a delicious cream mixture. I started with whipped cream and then added some softened mascarpone cheese, some powdered sugar. I'm gonna use this to pipe little rims around Santa's hat. Now I'll go around just inside the circle with a little fluff. And then I'll grab a strawberry. I took off the stems and I'll stick it right on top. How cute is that? Okay, now he needs a little bit of a poof right on top. Adorable.
Making one of our favorite recipes, pumpkin pie, which is rich and custardy and has incredible depth of flavor because I make a cooked filling and then I put it into a pie crust and bake and decorate with fresh whipped cream. So to start, I'll take my 1 can of pumpkin and I'm gonna add it to a saucepan. I'm gonna add 1/3 cup each of granulated sugar and brown sugar and 1/4 cup of maple syrup for my 3rd type of sugar. And that's just gonna mean more dimension of flavor. I'll season with a teaspoon of salt. And now I'm gonna cook this, stirring until it's glossy and thickened, and that's gonna allow the sugars to melt and caramelize. This is smelling really good. I'm gonna grab my heavy cream and milk. I'll add 3/4 cup of each of these. And one thing that I find so uniquely delicious about this pie is that you can actually taste the milky richness of it. And I'm using the combo so that it's really rich, but not overly rich. I'm gonna switch to a whisk now so I can whisk it all in. And now I'm just gonna heat this until the milk gets steamy. I don't wanna bring it to a boil and scald the milk. This is looking so creamy already. As this heats up, I'm gonna crack in my eggs. I've got 3 whole eggs and 2 egg yolks for added richness. So now anytime you want to incorporate eggs into a hot mixture like this, you've got to temper them, and that means warming them up gradually. Because if I were to just crack them in, they would scramble and the texture would not be smooth. I'm gonna grab a ladle. This always takes some coordination, but I'm gonna add a little bit of the hot mixture as I'm whisking the eggs. And this is essentially gonna gradually cook them while maintaining their smooth texture. My egg mixture is warm to the touch, and that's how I know it's ready to be added back into the pot. So with one hand, I'll drizzle it in, and with the other hand, I'm gonna continue to whisk. Perfect. I'm gonna continue to cook this while it thickens, and in the meantime, I'll grab my spices. I've got cinnamon and nutmeg, and pulling out the fancy vanilla beans. Oh, they smell so good. So I'm gonna slice it in half and just scrape out the pods. And I'm gonna use the blunt end of my knife to scrape them out. And this is gonna add fancy vanilla flavor and really pretty speckles. Okay, I'll scrape this into the filling. A little really goes a long way. And then I don't like to add too many spices, just enough to enhance the pumpkin flavor. So 1/2 teaspoon of cinnamon and 1/4 teaspoon of freshly grated nutmeg. I'll whisk this in. I love being able to see the speckles of the spices and the vanilla bean. My filling is done. I'll grab my crust, which is blind baking in the oven. This is just my go-to pie crust. Flour, sugar, and salt, blended with cold butter, and then formed into a dough with a little apple cider vinegar and ice water. I rolled it out and crimped the edges. This is beautiful. I'm gonna taste the filling before I add it in, just in case I wanna make any adjustments. Yum. There are so many things going on in that filling, and they all just mesh together in the most beautiful way. I'm gonna pour this into the crust, and I'm gonna bake this at 375 degrees for 30 to 40 minutes until the outside is set, but the center is still a little jiggly. That's how you prevent it from cracking. Oh, yes, this is perfectly done. It's set around the outside, but it's still a little soft on the inside. I'm gonna let this cool completely, decorate with fresh whipped cream and cinnamon, and then it is gonna be the sweet star of the show.
I could make a holiday version of sticky buns that would be so delicious and ridiculously easy. You start by combining 12 tablespoons of room temperature butter and 1/3 of a cup of brown sugar. Into a 12-cup muffin pan, place 1 rounded tablespoon of the mixture into each of the muffin cups. Then, sprinkle 1/2 cup of chopped pecans evenly on top of the butter and sugar mixture. Now for the pastry. Lightly flour a wooden board or a stone surface. Unfold 1 sheet of puff pastry with the folds going left to right. Brush the entire sheet with 1 tablespoon of melted butter. Sprinkle over 1/3 of a cup of light brown sugar, 1½ teaspoons of ground cinnamon, some really seasonal flavors, 1/4 cup of dried cranberries, they're perfect for the holidays, 1/4 cup of white raisins, just to balance the tartness of the cranberries. Now, starting with the end nearest to you, roll the pastry up snugly, just like a jelly roll, right around the filling. Finish rolling it with the seam side down. Trim just a little bit off the ends of the roll, just to straighten it out. Slice the roll in 6 equal pieces, each one's about 1½ inches, and place each piece spiral side up in 6 of the muffin cups. Repeat with the second sheet of puff pastry to make 12 sticky buns. Okay, so then bake the sticky buns for 30 minutes at 400 degrees until they're golden to dark brown on top and firm to the touch. Be careful, they're really hot. Allow it to cool for 5 minutes only. Invert the buns onto a parchment paper. You can just ease the filling and the pecans out with a spoon and cool them completely. That's my holiday take on Chelsea buns.
Red velvet hot chocolate. We're gonna start with a couple of cups of milk, and we're gonna scald the milk. And when the milk gets hot, then we're gonna add some of the cocoa powder and some semi-sweet chocolate to that. We're gonna make it red by adding a little bit of red dye. So while that's going, we're gonna make our marshmallow whipped cream. Put about a cup of heavy cream into our mixer. And then some cream cheese, some softened cream cheese. And a splash of vanilla extract. Then, I'm gonna take our marshmallow topping, and I'm just gonna fold it into the whipped cream. I kinda like this marshmallow topping stuff. You know, it's like, as a kid, I would, eat peanut butter sandwiches with it. I like to actually kinda fold it into whipped cream so it's not as marshmallow intense. This way you have sort of the marshmallow rolling through the whipped cream. What is red velvet hot chocolate? The hot chocolate is red, the marshmallow whipped cream is white. You know, it's the red and white goes, perfectly for the holidays. The very first red velvet cake did not have red dye in it. The way they got the red velvet idea, it was chocolate or cocoa powder mixed together with a little bit of vinegar, and then it created this sort of red brick color to the cake. And that's how red velvet cake came to pass. Now, of course, most people put some sort of red dye in there so they can really send home the idea that it's a red cake. But we're not making red velvet cake. We're making red velvet hot chocolate. Okay, so we're gonna take 2 tablespoons of cocoa powder. I love cocoa powder. Making hot chocolate like this reminds me of when I used to make it with my mom when I was a kid, where we used to get marshmallows and just kind of put the marshmallows on top. And as a kid, like, you didn't really want the hot chocolate, you just wanted the marshmallows because they were melting. Now, sometimes what I do is I put like a semi-sweet chocolate in there. This is gonna make it incredibly rich and flavorful and not too sweet. All right, so here's the base of our hot chocolate, and I think it's important to give it a taste. Wow, is that intense? And not too sweet, too. That's why it's important to use the semi-sweet chocolate. You want to taste the hot chocolate in the pot before you actually start putting it together in the cups with the whipped cream and all that, because you want to make sure that it tastes right. Because if it needs a little sugar, or you want to thin it out, or make it thicker, you can do that now. I mean, this chocolate is so thick, it's almost like chocolate pudding. It's crazy. But I like my hot chocolate nice and rich. I'm gonna add a teaspoon of vanilla extract, which is, I always find kind of weird. It's like add vanilla to your chocolate, but it just brings out that chocolate flavor. And then we're gonna make it red by adding a little bit of red dye, about a tablespoon of red dye. Oh yeah, there it is. What we've all been waiting for, the red velvet hot chocolate. Okay, you ready? Watch this. See, it's got that deep red color. I mean, you want it to be this brick red. You don't want it to be fluorescent red. We did a red velvet cake throwdown in Brooklyn, which I think we actually somehow won against Cake Man Raven. This is the whipped cream with the marshmallow in it. And there you go. I've been waiting all day to try this. I mean, it's incredibly rich. It tastes like chocolate, you know, and that's, to me, is the key. And it's not very sweet. It's sort of a semi-sweet, exactly what the chocolate is. So it's got a little bit of sugar, a little bit of sweetness, but you can really taste the flavor of the chocolate itself. It's beautiful.
I'm making my hazelnut Gelt cookies, which are super thick and nutty and topped with sparkly chocolate coins. To get started on my dough, I'll mix up my dry ingredients and I'll scoop in 1 1/3 cups of hazelnut flour, which is really finely ground hazelnuts. It helps with the structure and moisture of the cookie. And then 3 1/2 cups of all-purpose flour. This is just a variation on my go-to sugar cookie cutout recipe. And I just love it because it stays really nice and thick. Teaspoon of baking powder and 3/4 of a teaspoon of kosher salt. And I'll whisk this all together. I'll mix up my wet ingredients now. I'll get 1 cup of softened unsalted butter and combine this with 2/3 of a cup of granulated sugar and 2/3 of a cup of powdered sugar. I love the combination of the two. The powdered sugar yields a little bit of a fluffier, softer cookie. I'm adding the zest of 1 orange, and it's just gonna perk these flavors right up. I'll get this onto my stand mixer and beat it until it's light and fluffy. That orange zest smells awesome. I'll crack my eggs and then add them 1 at a time, beating well after each. I'll drizzle in a teaspoon of vanilla. And now I can add my dry ingredients. I'll do this gradually so that they don't go flying everywhere. That hazelnut is really nice. This dough is coming together. The butter smells really good. And now my favorite thing about this cookie recipe, well, other than eating them, is that I don't have to refrigerate the dough before cutting out the shapes. You could if you wanted to. You could get ahead and stick the dough in the refrigerator, but I'm impatient. I just want to eat these really soon. So I'll grab a rolling pin and my baking sheet. I'll dust my counter with a little flour so the dough doesn't stick. Oh, this is such a pretty dough. Ready for this plop. I'll gather it up. Oh yeah, that's nice and soft. Now, my other favorite part about this cookie is that it is destined to be super thick. So I'm rolling this out gently and evenly, and I'll rotate it every so often to ensure that it's not sticking. If it is, I can just dust with a little more flour. To punch out my shapes, I've got a 2 1/2-inch circle cutter, and I'll just cut out my dough. That is the perfect thickness. And look at those clean edges. It's what I like to see in a cookie. I'll just keep punching out my circles and then spacing them 1 inch apart. These cookies look rich. I'll get them in the oven now at 350 degrees for about 12 minutes until they are ever so slightly browned on the bottom. That will ensure that they're still soft in the middle. My cookies are cooling. They smell hazelnutty and amazing, and I'm ready to make their homemade Gelt hats. I've got some white chocolate chips here that I'll melt in a double boiler, which is a pot of simmering water with a heat-safe bowl on top. It's important to do that with chocolate so that you don't burn it. And I'll just stir this up as it gets melty and smooth. It's already starting to melt. And you can use any kind of chocolate too. Maybe you want to make some extra valuable Gelt and use fancy chocolate. Okay, this is melted and smooth and we're ready to decorate. So this is so easy. I'm gonna take a teaspoon of chocolate, dollop it in the center of one of my cookies. I'll swirl it around to make a coin. That is 1 valuable piece of chocolate money. And sprinkle on some sprinkles. Ta-da! Just like that. Okay, I'll decorate the rest so we can get our dreidel on. So much funica. All right, I'm going in. They're so soft and hazelnutty. That's my kind of currency.
I'm gonna make French chocolate bar. It's so delicious. First thing I wanna do is roast some cashews, 350 degrees for just a few minutes. Okay, while those are baking, I'm just gonna chop up some chocolate. So I'm chopping 2 kinds of chocolate here. I've got semi-sweet chocolate and bittersweet chocolate. I just think one's a little too sweet, one's a little too bitter for me, but you can do whatever combination you like. And I'm doing about 7 or 8 ounces of each one. There are a lot of recipes for chocolate that actually call for tempering it, which is a whole process that I really can't be bothered with. So the tempering, what it does is stop the chocolate from turning gray the next day. So I figured out the easiest thing to do was make it the same day as the party. So I'm just gonna stir this over simmering water. You don't want it too hot, just until it's melted. Okay, I'm gonna go get the cashews out of the oven. They just smell so much better when they're roasted just a little bit. It really brings out the flavor. Looks like the chocolate's melted. Just take it off and let it start to cool. Okay, cranberries, which just go in as they are, and some apricots I'm gonna chop up because they'd be too big. Good thing about this kind of a chocolate bark is you can do anything you want. You could even put trail mix in if you wanted to. Usually American bark like this has the nuts and raisins and fruit all mixed in. But in France, what they do is they do a sheet of chocolate and have all these things on top so you can see them. Looks so much prettier. Okay, so now I'm gonna show you what I'm gonna do. So I'm gonna take half sheet pan lined with parchment paper. And I'm gonna roughly measure a square, about 9 inches by 10 inches. And then to make sure I don't get pencil on the chocolate, just turn it over. And take the chocolate and just pour it in that square. And don't worry, it's gonna be a little thicker in some places than others, but that's the nature of chocolate bark. Just spread it right into the corners. It's gonna be a rough rectangle. Look how nice and shiny the chocolate is. And now I'm just gonna put everything on top of the chocolate. So just a handful of cashews, and a handful of chopped apricots, and a handful of cranberries. And I'm just gonna let this rest for 2 hours at room temperature, and we're gonna have chocolate bark. So I've got the chocolate bark. I'm just gonna cut it in small squares, because it's amazing, this really just hardened at room temperature. Okay. This looks fantastic.
To have something a little sweet on the table, I'm making quick and easy peppermint fudge. There are basically 3 ingredients. It couldn't be easier, and it's really surprisingly delicious. Now I just added 3 cups of chocolate chips to a double boiler, and I'll just pour in a can of sweetened condensed milk. This stuff is the nectar of the gods. All right, and then I'll just stir these together and let them melt really slowly. Okay, this is just about melted. So I'll spray the pan. I just have a little square pan and I lined it in foil, and that'll make the fudge easier to take out of the pan. That should be enough. Now I thought it'd be really fun to top the fudge with crushed peppermints. You can use any kind of candy you want or colored sprinkles. I really like chocolate and mint together. So I'm just gonna crush these up. It's gonna be loud. Goodness, the kids are gonna run in here in a minute and find out what's wrong. Okay, that's good. I still have some bigger chunks so you can see what the candy is, but mostly it's all broken up. All right, let me check the chocolate mixture. All right, it's great. Now, it's kind of like a marshmallow fluff texture at this point. This looks perfect. Now, I'll just pour it into the pan. And you have to act really fast. As soon as I get it in there, I'm gonna start spreading it out because it sets up really quickly. Okay, this looks just great. Now I'm gonna pop the pan in the fridge until the fudge is totally set, and then I'll cut it into squares for the buffet. I'll just lift the fudge right out of the pan, and this is the advantage of lining the pan with foil. And now I'm gonna slice the fudge into little squares and put it on this cake stand.
Sweet potato pone. It's a sweet potato casserole, kind of sort of like a custard as well. It's a great side dish, or it could be served as a sweet dessert. My favorite way to serve it is with a sweet eggnog whipped cream. It really brings out those warm flavors. But before we get going, preheat your oven to 350 and get a 9x9 casserole dish and spray it with non-stick cooking spray. All right. Ain't nothing to it but to do it. Let's head over to our stove. So what we're doing now is heating our saucepan. I have a cute little pan here, but any saucepan will work. Let's melt 4 tablespoons of unsalted butter. I like using unsalted butter because I can control the amount of salt that goes into the dish. And right now we're just gonna wait for that butter to melt. Okay, just a few more seconds. And you can swivel your saucepan around just to help the melting go a little faster. And that's it, our butter is melted. All right, let's head back over to the counter. Set your butter to the side. And now we're gonna peel and grate about 2 pounds of sweet potato, which equals about 3 sweet potatoes, okay? So sweet potato pone is sort of like, well, it has the same flavors of a sweet potato pie, but it's more like a custard. It's gonna have a really soft but firm texture. You're gonna get the texture of the grated sweet potatoes in there as well, but it definitely has the flavor of a sweet potato pie. We're gonna peel all 3. Leaving none of the skin on. Okay. Right. And this is a recipe my great-grandmother passed down to my grandmother. It's something that she made in her household on special occasions. When she didn't feel like making a sweet potato pie, she would make a sweet potato pone. And she actually served it for breakfast. See? It's a very versatile dish. All right, let's clean up the potato skin. All right, we're gonna use the finer side of the grater. If you want larger strips of sweet potato, you can use this side, but I prefer to use the finer side, okay? What I like to do is just cut off the ends and just grate using the finer side. This is where you get your workout in. If you find this process a little too much, then you can always cook your sweet potatoes and then mash them. I prefer shredding like my great-grandmother did because I like the texture of shredded sweet potatoes in this dessert. So if you use the finer side of your grater, it should look something like this, thin shreds. It's a slow process. Things in Gullah just don't happen quickly. It's not fast food. If it comes easy, it won't last long. Okay. So Gullah cooking is not really heavy on the desserts. I've found in recent years, over the last few decades, that we've incorporated more of just the Southern way of making desserts. But typically, Gullah cooking does not have a lot of sweets. We have sweet potato pie, we have sweet potato pone, we make bread pudding, but just out of the way they lived during those times, like when my great-grandmother was growing up, they just didn't have the resources. So if there was anything sweet, it would come from the land. My ancestors' definition of a dessert was getting a sweet watermelon from the watermelon patch, you know? It wasn't necessarily cakes and cookies. It was eating the sweets of the earth, like a sweet potato. It is the truth. My grandma, we ain't have no cakes. We had sweet potato pie, sweet potato pone, and bread pudding if we were lucky. Ooh, child. A triceps. So I'm going to keep grating these. I'll meet you back here when we're done. Okay, we've grated up all of our sweet potatoes. Now we're going to add that melted butter, 4 tablespoons, into a large bowl. Now we're going to add 1/3 cup of light brown sugar. Make sure it's packed into your measuring cup. And we're going to add 1/4 cup of molasses. I'm just going to eyeball this. Okay. Let's whisk together our sugars and butter. Okay. Leave your whisk in the bowl. Let's whisk together 3 eggs in a separate bowl. 3 whole eggs. And it's good to use a separate bowl for your eggs because you want to make sure that the eggs are thoroughly whisked. Just whisk until the yolk is broken. Okay. That whisk. Add your whisked eggs to the bowl. And now we're going to add 1/2 cup of 50/50. We're going to add in a teaspoon of vanilla extract. That's just about 1 capful. Okay. Now we're going to add in our spices. We have a 1/2 teaspoon of cinnamon, 1/2 teaspoon of ginger. It's going to give it a really nice snap. 1/2 teaspoon of kosher salt. Really brings those sugars out. All right, now we're just going to add in a little nutmeg. I'm using fresh. Fresh is much more pronounced than ground nutmeg. So use just a little more if you want that more of that nutmeg flavor, okay? All right, give it a whisk. And this is going to look like a custard, right? This is going to give you a custard in your bowl here. All right, we're just going to grate in a little bit of fresh orange zest, just to give it a little hint of citrus. So we grated in about a teaspoon of fresh orange zest. Now we're just going to add in the juice of 1/2 of this orange, about 3 tablespoons of freshly squeezed orange juice. Give it another whisk. Wipe your hands if you need to. This is not an overly sweet dessert. You're going to get a lot of that sweetness, fresh sweetness from the sweet potatoes, okay? Now we're just going to add in our grated sweet potato. And we're going to incorporate that with the spatula, okay? All right. Let's fold in our sweet potato with our custard. So folding in helps you mix all of your ingredients in without losing the volume. Just make sure the custard is fully mixed in with the sweet potatoes. I like to fold and pat, scraping the bottom up. All right, that looks great. Let's get our 9x9 casserole dish that's been sprayed with non-stick cooking spray. And just add in your mixture. Okay. All right, just fold it down here. Press it down firmly into your casserole dish here. Just fold it on down. Make sure it's nice and even. Okay. All All right, so we're gonna cover this with foil. All right, let's head over to the oven. Bake it covered for 40 minutes. Okay. And while that's in the oven, we're gonna put our bowl and mixer in the freezer. Remember, we gotta make this eggnog whipped cream. So let's get this chill for 40, hit pause, and I'll meet you back here soon. Hey, it's been 40 minutes and it's time to uncover our pone. Okay, let's take that foil right off, okay? In the next 10 minutes, it's gonna get nice and caramelized on top, okay? While that happens, let's make our eggnog whipped cream. Our bowl has been chilling for 40 minutes with the beater in the freezer. The reason I like doing that is to get a nice stapled whipped cream, okay? And it needs to be very cold in order to get that, okay? Now we're gonna add in a cup of heavy cream to our cold bowl. Okay. All right. And I like to add in a few tablespoons of confectioner's sugar here. That's gonna help get some of that volume in the whipped cream as well. Let's start off with 3 heavy tablespoons. You can taste to see if you can adjust, if you want to add more, but 3 tablespoons should do. All right, let's get our mixer on high. And we're just going to beat this until it gets nice and fluffy. We're looking for stiff peaks. There's one thing that I learned when I started making whipped cream at home is that if you beat too much, you will destroy that whipped cream. So slowly beat, and if it looks like it's getting thick, just take your time. Do not overbeat or you will have to start over again, okay? And it's already starting to get some volume. Now this is not a part of the original sweet potato pone recipe. I like to do my contemporary spins on my family's traditional recipes. So this is just a great addition to that sweet potato pone. Okay. Let's slow down. It looks like it's getting nice and thick, and we definitely have stiff peaks. Stiff because the bowl was cold, the beater was cold, and the heavy whipping cream is also cold, okay? Let's grate in some nutmeg. I'm using fresh, but you can definitely use ground nutmeg if you have that in your pantry. And let's say it's a 1/4 teaspoon of freshly grated nutmeg or ground nutmeg. Okay. Now we're gonna fold in a 1/3 cup of eggnog. Okay. Gently fold that in. You don't want to break your whipped cream, okay? That should do it. This is a great holiday whipped cream. It's really going to bring forth those warm flavors in the pone. Okay, that looks nice and velvety. Let's taste just to make sure we don't need to add any more nutmeg. That's great. It's velvety. You taste a hint of that eggnog and the nutmeg. That is going to go really great on top of that sweet potato pone. So this is done. We have a few more minutes on that pone. Hit pause and I'll meet you back here in a few. Alrighty, it's been 10 minutes. Our sweet potato pone has been cooking uncovered. Now it's done. So let's pull it out of the oven. Oh, it smells incredible, doesn't it? Okay. Look at that. Nice and golden brown, super bubbly on the edges. Okay, so the best way to serve sweet potato pone is at room temperature. That way it's already set and gets nice and solid. So let this rest for about 30 minutes and we'll meet back and taste it. All right, so it's been about 30 minutes and our sweet potato pone has come to room temperature. Let's plate and taste it. Okay. what I like to do is cut just a little square. Just loosen it up around the edges. Take a cake server and just scoot underneath. It's a nice little size for myself. And that's how it should look when you take it out of your casserole dish. Now let's top it with our whipped eggnog cream. Just a little dollop on top. All right, give it a try. Oh yeah, this smells delicious. I don't know about you, but it's making me dance. The texture of the sweet potatoes, it's velvety, it's smooth, getting all of the flavors of the nutmeg, the cinnamon. I definitely taste that orange zest and orange juice. It just complements those warm spices really well. And then that whipped eggnog cream just smooths everything on out. This is Gullah sweet potato pone.
There's something about the holidays that calls for really special treats, and I think of truffles, chocolate truffles. I'm going to take a half a cup of heavy cream and just heat it up. What you don't want to do is boil this, because there's nothing worse than the taste of boiled cream. Okay, can't make chocolate truffles without lots of chocolate. I'm using bittersweet and semi-sweet. I think bittersweet's a little too bitter and semi-sweet's a little too sweet, so I like to combine the two and get sort of halfway in between. So that's 3½ ounces of semi-sweet chocolate. Chop it up fairly fine, because what I'm going to do is pour the hot cream over it, and it'll melt the chocolate. Now I'm going to chop up 3½ ounces of bittersweet. You know, true chocolate aficionados only like bittersweet chocolate, but I have to say, it's a little bitter for me. So the key to this is to add flavorings that really complement the chocolate. I find vanilla and coffee really make chocolate taste more chocolatey. And then I like to add one other flavor, so there's sort of a back note to it. Very often I use Grand Marnier, but this time I think I'm going to do it with hazelnuts. So I'm going to do chopped hazelnuts on the outside and frangelico, which is hazelnut liqueur on the inside. So the next thing I'm going to do is pour this warm cream. It's actually hot. It's just under the simmering point, through a strainer onto the chocolate. And the cream is going to melt the chocolate. And just stir this. The good thing about this system is you can't overheat the chocolate. The cream just gets under the simmering point and it'll just melt the chocolate. So I'm going to let that melt and add the other flavorings. 1½ tablespoons of frangelico liqueur, which is a hazelnut liqueur. 1 tablespoon of coffee, prepared coffee, which I have from this morning. And if it's hot, it's even better. Helps melt the chocolate. And ½ teaspoon of good vanilla extract. And if I've played my cards right, the chocolate should be melted by now. So just stir it around. And I bet it's pretty good too. I have chocolate all over me. Oh, it's so good. I love the balance of bittersweet and semi-sweet. So I'm going to chill this for about 45 minutes and then make little balls and roll them in hazelnuts. So it's time to scoop the truffles. So what I've got is a chilled mixture of semi-sweet chocolate, bittersweet chocolate, and all kinds of delicious flavorings like hazelnut liqueur, frangelico, vanilla, coffee, and cream. And they've been chilling in the refrigerator. You can scoop this with spoons the old-fashioned way, but a small ice cream scoop makes it really lovely. It's easy, and you get every single ball exactly the same. And I'm going to roll each one in chopped hazelnuts that I've toasted in an oven for about 10 minutes at 325. Now that looks good enough to eat. Remember, you don't want perfect little circles, you want them to look like wild truffles. It's great for the holidays. Just pack them up in a bag, and it's a great hostess gift. I'm co-hosting a party for a crowd with my friend Susan Stroman. So for dessert, I'm making fruitcake cookies. For anybody who doesn't like fruitcake, forget it. You'll love these. So I'm starting with 2 sticks of butter and ½ teaspoon of cloves. These are really spicy and they're just fabulous. 1/3 cup of brown sugar. When measuring brown sugar, you want it lightly packed. Not so firm that you can't get it out of the cup, but lightly packed. Half a cup of granulated sugar, white sugar. I'm just going to cream that together until it's light and fluffy. So while that creams, I'm going to show you the fruit and nut mix that I've been macerating for 8 hours so all the flavors blend together. I'll show you how I did it. So the mix has 4 dried fruits. First the figs, about 1/2 pound. Next, 1/4 pound of raisins. 2 ounces of candied cherries. And 2 ounces of dried apricots. Then for sweetness, a tablespoon of honey. And 2 tablespoons of dry sherry. Doesn't this remind you of a mixture for fruitcake? This is so much better. For brightness, a tablespoon of fresh lemon juice. And some nutty crunch from 6 ounces of pecans. Chop them roughly, and then they go into the mix. A pinch of salt, and then just let it sit for 8 hours until all those flavors blend together and the dried fruits all plump up. This looks great, and you can really taste the sherry. It's gonna be delicious. But these are for later. First, I'm gonna finish the batter. So the next thing I need, the butter and sugar nicely creamed, is 1 egg. I never put an egg directly into the batter because if it's a bad egg, you ruin the whole batter. Next, 2 2/3 cups of flour. Just lighten the flour with your cup and then level it off. You don't want to pack it down. And 2/3 cups. Just add it in on low speed. Pinch of salt, about 1/4 teaspoon, and the batter's done. Now I just have to add all the dried fruit. So all the pecans and candied cherries and raisins and apricots, figs, just fold them all right in. It's gonna be gorgeous. Now I'm just gonna divide the dough in half and put it right on this parchment paper. Schmutz it around, and then roll it up. So I'm just gonna chill these cookies, and then I'm gonna slice them and bake them before I head to Susan's house. Fruitcake cookies for a crowd. I love this recipe. All you do is slice and bake the cookies, and people go crazy. In fact, I just keep the roll in the refrigerator and just slice and bake them whenever I want. But this time, I'm making them all. I'm just gonna cut them about 3/8 inch thick, should be perfect. There's so much flavor. Into the oven, 350 degrees for 15 to 20 minutes until they just start to brown. And then all I have to do is keep myself from eating them. Am I gonna be able to resist these? I don't think so. I have to make sure they're good, right? They're so good.
Sugar cookie mini cakes. They're basically like 3-dimensional sugar cookies, and they are so delicious and tons of fun to make. We're gonna be using some of my best baking tips to get you through the Christmas cookie season with minimal stress. So if you're baking along with me, make sure you have the proper tools. Get your oven preheated to 350. Have a baking sheet ready with some parchment paper so that the cookies don't stick. You're gonna want some cookie cutters. This set of nested cookie cutters is perfect because you're gonna want all different sizes. A piping bag fitted with a nice large tip that's round, and a rolling pin or a wine bottle if you don't have a rolling pin, and either a stand mixer or a hand electric mixer. Are you guys ready? Okay, let's do this. So first, grab a medium-sized bowl for all of your dry ingredients. And in this bowl, add 3 cups of all-purpose flour, I always like to mix up my dry ingredients first when I'm baking. It makes the process cleaner. You have less dishes to do because then you can use the same measuring spoons for the wet ingredients. You don't have to wash them off in between. And keep your flour on standby too, because when we roll out the sugar cookies, you're gonna wanna use the flour to dust your work surface so that the cookies don't stick. And when you're measuring out your flour, fluff it up first with your measuring cup to aerate it. That way you won't get too much flour. And then scoop it, pile it in, and level it off with your finger or a knife so that you have exactly 1 cup. Okay, Stick your flour aside, but again, don't let it go too far. And now grab your baking powder. And while I'm at the pantry, I'm also gonna get my vanilla extract and almond extract. Adding baking powder to your cookie dough is gonna help the cookies puff up in the oven, and that's gonna make the texture a little bit softer and fluffier. Add 3/4 of a teaspoon of baking powder. And 3/4 of a teaspoon of kosher salt. It's always important to salt your sweets. That brings out all the flavors, and it just tastes really good. And now give these dry ingredients a whisk to combine. It's important to get these combined because you do not want to get any large bits of baking powder or salt in a bite. If you've ever bitten into a cookie where the baking powder isn't fully incorporated, it's not fun. This would be an awesome activity for a holiday party. I love hosting cookie decorating parties. Bake all the cookies first and then get tons of frosting and decorations and stick them on the table, and people can just hang out and decorate cookies together and eat the cookies, and it's so much fun. Okay, how are your dry ingredients looking? Are they combined? Good. Grab your big bowl now. You can set this aside, and now add 1 cup of softened unsalted butter to your bowl. This is so much butter on this plate. This is for the frosting. And to this bowl, add 1 cup of sugar. And now grab your hand mixer and beat the butter and the sugar together until it's pale and fluffy. This will take a couple minutes. Every so often, you can stop and use your rubber spatula to scrape down the sides, and that's to make sure that all of the butter and the sugar gets incorporated. This cookie dough is just a basic sugar cookie dough. You can use this for any kind of cutout, even sandwich cookies or Linzer cookies. It's really delicious and super easy to make. Now, once your mixture is looking nice and fluffy, grab your egg. And crack your egg right in. And then also add 1½ teaspoons of vanilla extract. And then ½ a teaspoon of almond extract. Now, I love the flavor of almond extract. I could have it in every single thing and not get sick of it. Oh, it smells so good. If you're not wild about it, just use vanilla, that's fine. Now mix this until the egg and the extracts have combined into the butter and sugar. And now it's time to add our dry ingredients. So gradually add the flour mixture. Do it in batches just to make sure that it doesn't go flying everywhere in the kitchen. So add about 1/3 of it first, and now we'll mix that in. And start your mixer on low. If you put it on too high right off the bat, flour will be flying everywhere in your kitchen, and you don't want that. And once all the flour is combined, or most of it at least, you can add another 1/3 of the flour mixture. And again, mix it in. Can you smell that vanilla? It smells so good. I love sugar cookies, especially around the holidays. I like them even more than gingerbread cookies. Add the rest of your dry ingredients. And now mix this in. How is your dough looking? Okay, if it's looking crumbly, that's how it should look. Once everything is combined, I want you to stop your mixer, and then you can just use your hands to bring everything together into a dough. Doesn't it feel so nice and soft? Now, once your dough has come together like this, you can lose your big bowl. And now divide it in half. And that's because we're only really gonna be working with half of the dough at once, and you wanna keep the other half cold. You don't want it to overheat, otherwise it's gonna be difficult to work with and cut out into your shapes. And if you wanted to prep this dough ahead of time, like 1 or 2 days, you could wrap it all in plastic wrap and keep it in the refrigerator. But right now, we're gonna be working with half, so keep half of it on your counter and grab some plastic wrap for the other half. So pat this out into a disc. It'll make it easier to roll out when the time comes to roll it out. And grab a piece of plastic wrap and wrap it tightly so that no air can get in. And now you can stick this in the refrigerator for later. So clear your work surface, sprinkle it with a little bit of flour so that the dough doesn't stick. And then you can also sprinkle the top with a little flour too. Pat it out, and then grab your rolling pin and roll it out until it's flat and about 1/4 inch thick. And the way that I like to roll it out is I'm using the weight of the rolling pin, and every so often I'm gonna rotate it just so that I'm making sure that it doesn't stick to the work surface, and also to ensure that I'm rolling it out evenly. How are you guys doing with your dough? Isn't this a fun, satisfying process? I love working with cookie dough. It's like working with clay. We're ready to cut out our circles. This dough is gonna be enough to do 2 of each of my different sizes of cookie cutters. So I'm gonna place my cookie cutter right up against the edge of the dough so that I can get the maximum amount of cookies. I'm going all the way around the edge, making sure to have minimal dough scraps. The less times that we re-roll the scraps, the better the texture of the cookies will be. If you overwork your dough, they might get a little tough. And if you don't have circles, you can use squares, you can use stars for this. You can really cut out any shapes that you want. Now, once you're done cutting out your shapes, grab an offset spatula. If you don't have a small offset spatula, just the smallest spatula that you have, or even a butter knife, and use that to get underneath the cookie and then transfer it to a parchment-lined baking sheet. And when you're placing these on the baking sheet, allow at least 1 inch in between them, because that's gonna allow the cookies to bake evenly on all sides. Now these are ready to bake. Bake them at 350 for about 8 to 10 minutes until they're lightly golden around the edges. And while these bake, let's just clean up and then make our frosting. This frosting is a classic American buttercream. It is so easy to make, and it's really rich and sweet. You ready? So grab the remaining softened butter and add that to your big bowl. And then also add 2 cups of powdered sugar. This is really the type of thing that you could just eyeball, because it does not have to be exact. Now slowly turn on your mixer. Once the powdered sugar starts to incorporate into the butter, you can increase the speed. Once this is going, you can add a pinch of kosher salt, and this will help bring out all the flavors and just balance out that sweetness. I started making these a few years ago. I was going through a phase of making mini cakes all the time. Itsy bitsy cute little layer cakes. And then one day I started making the layers out of cookies, and they were so much fun. They were really stable, and they were great for cookie swaps, and you actually get 5 cookies in one. So now they've become a tradition. And you can increase the speed. Once your frosting is looking smooth and creamy, you can add your vanilla and a little almond if you want. I'll add my vanilla, and then a little bit of almond. And those 2 flavors together are so delicious. And to me, they just scream holidays. Also grab some heavy cream. Heavy cream is gonna bring everything together and smooth it out and make the texture so much creamier. I'm gonna add a couple of tablespoons. And again, this is something that can be eyeballed too. And now I'll mix this all to combine. And if you don't have heavy cream, you can also use a tablespoon or two of whole milk. Now lastly, add your food coloring. We should use green because it's Christmas trees, and I like using this mossy green color. Add a few drops. You can always add more, but it's difficult to take away, so start with a little and then add more until you get the color that you want. How is your frosting looking? Are you smelling your cookies yet? Let's check on them. These are perfect. They are set. They're still pale, so I know they're gonna be a little soft. Okay, I'm gonna let these cool while I finish up my frosting. Now grab your piping bag that's fitted with the tip. And if you don't have a piping bag, you can use a zip top bag with the corner snipped off. Fold the sides down, and I always find it easiest to put it in a big cup or a big measuring cup like this, and that way you'll have both hands free to fill your bag. And grab your spatula and scrape all the frosting into the piping bag. Just plop it right in. We can lose the food coloring and the extracts too. Whenever I'm decorating, I like to have a clean surface. I don't want to have any distractions. Now, grab some serving plates, or I'm gonna use cute little cake stands. Aren't these adorable? Extra special for the holidays. Grab your decorations, so some sprinkles or candies. We are ready to assemble. So fold up the top of your piping bag and smush all the frosting down toward the tip. And as you're doing so, give the top a twist so that the frosting doesn't come out the other end. Add a little pop of frosting to your cake stands so that the cookies don't move around. This is gonna act as your glue. Grab the biggest cookies, stick them down. And then add a layer of frosting. A nice thick layer of frosting. And then smush on the next biggest cookie. Like that. And now do it with the remaining cookies. Just like that. These are gonna be really big cookie cakes. Delicious. We'll go right on top. And the last layer of our little cartoon Christmas trees. And then you can finish with a layer of frosting. And then, of course, sprinkles to decorate. Oh, we should use a yellow ball to act as the star of the tree. Yeah. Oh, do you guys all have sprinkle tweezers in the kitchen? You should. It'll help with this. And just decorate your Christmas trees however you want. Have fun with it. How cute are these? They look just like little cartoon Christmas trees. Okay, I'm gonna taste one. They're soft and sweet, and the frosting has the perfect amount of almond in it. This is just how a Christmas cookie should taste. Okay, sorry, Santa. I'm not saving any for you.
Pumpkin ginger snap cheesecake. I'm just gonna make the crust first. I've got a package of ginger snaps, and I'm gonna let the food processor grind them up. I want to get them really fine. Okay, the crumbs look perfect. Oh, I love the smell of ginger snaps. I'll add some brown sugar and some chopped pecans. I chopped them pretty fine. And a dash of salt. There's a lot of sweetness in here. I'll just stir this together and mix it up. To bring the crust all together, I'll drizzle in some melted butter. This is about 6 tablespoons of butter, not too much. You just want enough to make the crumbs come together. All right, the crumbs look delicious. So I'll just dump them into a springform pan. And then I'll just use my fingers to press it into the bottom of the pan. And I want to bring the crumbs up along the sides of the pan by about 1/2 inch. Before I pour the filling into the crust, I'm just going to chill it for about 30 minutes. So while the crust chills, I'm going to go whip up the delicious filling. So I'm just going to get a whole bunch of cream cheese into the mixer and beat it until it's soft, scraping the bowl once. I'll add a can of pumpkin puree and mix that in, scraping it again. Then I'll add 3 eggs, one at a time. That's the first, the second, and the third. Okay, now it's in with sour cream. And next, with the mixer on low, I'm gonna add sugar, cinnamon, nutmeg, and vanilla. I'll really scrape the bowl before giving it all one final mix. Okay, that's done. Ready for the next step. The crust should be all set. Yep, looks good. Now I'm just gonna pour this luscious filling right in. This stuff is divine, delightful, all the adjectives that begin with D that I can think of. I'll just spread this into a single layer. Lad dropped me off and he actually has to go back out there and work a little bit. I'm sure he won't get as much done without me helping him, but he'll get by. All right, the cheesecake just needs to go into a 350-degree oven for about 50 minutes. Now, while the cheesecake bakes, I'm gonna whip up a delicious salted caramel sauce to drizzle over the top. Not only is it yummy on the cheesecake, but it's also good to drizzle over all the other pies that people are bringing. It's so easy to whip up. Here goes. I just get some butter into a pan, along with brown sugar, heavy cream, vanilla, and some salt. Then I'll gently whisk it for 5 minutes or so, just until it thickens. Now I'll just get the sauce into a jar. Oh, look at that sauce. So thick and rich. Dessert tomorrow can't come soon enough for me. Now, this is the moment that the cheesecake gets freed from its pan. I put it on a cake stand and it goes on the island. And let's just pause for 1 small second for a dessert fantasy.
It's a really easy dough to make. I make it in an electric mixer fitted with a paddle attachment. First, I put in 3/4 pound of room temperature butter. Then I add 1 cup of sugar and a teaspoon of good vanilla. Add 3½ cups of all-purpose flour. And finally, 1/4 teaspoon of kosher salt. Turn the mixer on low and just mix the ingredients until they just come together. Turn the dough out into a floured board and shape it until it comes into a flat disc. Wrap the disc in plastic wrap and chill in the refrigerator for about 30 minutes. So this is the shortbread dough. It's been chilled, and I'm gonna roll it out and make cookies. This is a really great dough, particularly because it's so flexible. I can make all different kinds of star shapes, and this time, I think I'm gonna cut it in half. It's a lot of cookies for just Miguel and me. And the good news is I can freeze the other half for the next time he shows up. And actually, I even flour the rolling pin. There's no point in making cookies if they're going to stick to the board. So I'm just going to roll this out about a ½ inch thick. Okay, ready for the cutter. So this is the sort of finger shape that I want to make. And just cut each cookie. Sometimes it's hard to come out of the cutter, but you just tap the edge on the board and it'll just come right out. So I'm using half-sheet pan parchment paper. Keeps the pan clean, the cookies bake better. I love parchment paper. These are gonna be delicious cookies. Just a little bit of sugar on the top, just gives them a little bit of sparkle when they come out of the oven. And then I'm gonna bake them 350 degrees for 20 to 25 minutes until they just start to brown on the edges. Shortbread cookies dipped in chocolate. Now, who would have a problem with that? So what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna shave some chocolate. I'm using semi-sweet chocolate, just enough for 10 cookies. If I do it in chunks, it's not gonna melt right, so it's important to just take your knife and just shave it off. First, I'm gonna put half the chocolate in a bowl and microwave it. "30 seconds. Okay, let's see how it's doing. So the first bit of chocolate's melted, and now what I'm going to do is add the rest of it and just melt it right in. And what this does is keep the temperature from getting too hot. When chocolate's melted and not tempered, it gets that sort of bloom where it's sort of gray. Not very pretty. You want really glossy, delicious chocolate. So that's just going to melt right in. Okay, time to dip the cookies. So the cookies are baked and cooled, and I'm just gonna drizzle chocolate across the top of each one. Just half. I like the way it looks when it's both. Now, how good does that look? They'll be delicious with a tray of shortbreads dipped in chocolate. Dinner just doesn't get any simpler or better than this.
Brown butter pecan pie. It's my spin on a Southern comfort food classic. That brown butter adds another layer of nuttiness, and I also top it with a bourbon whipped cream. Before we begin, grab a stick of cold unsalted butter, preheat your oven to 400 degrees, grab a medium bowl and chill that for the bourbon whipped cream, and also grab a 1/3 cup of cold water. Okay, let's get started on our pie dough. Grab 1 1/4 cup of all-purpose flour. Level it off. Add it to your bowl. Now, the 4th cup. We're going to add 1 tablespoon of sugar, granulated sugar. A 1/2 teaspoon of kosher salt. Mix that in. And now let's grate in our cold butter. We're gonna grate in 1 stick of butter. And the reason we're grating in the butter because it distributes evenly when you grate it in. Yeah, and it's okay when of course your hand is a little warm, so it'll start to melt a little bit. Don't worry about that, as long as most of your butter is grated. Okay. Give that a mix with your fork, breaking up that butter. Okay. What we can do is just use your hand. Break up some of that butter with your hand. And we still have to add our water. And you want to use your fingers to crumble this up into pea sizes. This is a traditional pie dough. You can use this for any pie. Key lime, lemon, chess pie. That looks like pea sizes. Let's eyeball our water. The recipe calls for 1/3 cup, but I have more just in case we'll need it. Just watch, I pour it in slowly at a time and then mix it in. What you're looking for is the dough to form a ball. Just keep mixing it around. This is the cold water we're adding. All right, now it's starting to form a ball. Okay, and I'm gonna have to use about a tablespoon more That's why you have to watch it. It depends on your kitchen, depends on how warm your hands are. Just adjust accordingly. You know that you've added enough water when your dough forms a ball. All right, let's clean our hands. Let's grab some bench flour. Flour your surface. Smooth it out. I like to take some of that flour in my hand, roll it around. You don't want to overwork your pie dough. Take a rolling pin, dust it with a little bit more flour. You want to roll this out to about 12 inches in diameter. You want it to be just a little bigger than your pie dish. Okay. All right, what I like to do is just, see, it's a little bigger, okay? Right, we're gonna take our pie dough and transfer it into our pie dish. Okay. What you wanna do is fold over your pie crust up here. Just pull it up and fold it over. And it makes it much easier if you have some flour on your hands. Folding it over. Pull it up, fold it over. Pull it up, fold it back. This is a homemade pie crust, guys. It's not gonna be perfect. And that's the beauty of it. Pull it up some more. And you're folding it back. Okay. And just make sure it's even up there. Pull it up if you need to. Press it down right here. Pull it up, press it down. Because it will fall into your pie dish, so you want to make sure you're pulling it up gently. Okay. If you're not comfortable with making crimps, you can always use a fork to make a small little indent in your crust. But I like using crimps, and I'll show you how to do that. Take your thumb finger, your index finger, and you take your index finger with your other hand and just press in. Press in. Press in. That simple. You're essentially pinching your pie dough. You want to make sure your hands are not sticky when you do this, because your fingers will stick to the dough. We're gonna pop our pie dough in the freezer for about 15 minutes, and the reason we're doing that is because we need our pie dough to set up. Let's head over to the freezer. All right, so it's been 15 minutes. Let's poke some holes at the bottom of our pie crust, and the reason we're doing that is because you need some air in this pie crust. Otherwise, it'll bubble up. Just tiny holes with a toothpick. If you don't have a toothpick, you can use a fork. All right, grab a parchment paper. Push it down. If you don't have pie weights, you can always use dried beans. And the reason we're using pie weights is because if you blindly bake a pie crust, it does have the tendency to bubble up. So in order for it to stay down in your pie dish, you have to put some type of weight on it, okay? All right, let's go over to our oven that's been preheated to 400. We're gonna bake it for 15 to 20 minutes. Right, hit that pause button. Meet me back here in 15 to 20 minutes. It's been about 15, 20 minutes. Let's remove our pie weights. Okay. Now we're gonna brush our pie crust with an egg wash. And the reason we are brushing the pie crust with an egg wash is to make it really pretty and shiny, and it also helps brown the pie crust. I have some water here in a small bowl. I'm gonna add 1 egg, give it a whisk. Using a brush, I'm gonna brush the edges. Glossy pie crust. I am a pie girl. You know, the funny thing about it is that I don't like fruit in my pies. I am more about the crust. I am invested in the crust. A warm crust with some ice cream, shut your mouth. What I like to do is, like, it doesn't matter if some of your egg wash gets at the bottom of your pie crust, just, I mean, it wouldn't hurt. Just use your brush and brush it around. Just make sure you get those edges, okay? What I like to also do at this point is get a paper towel and just clean it up a little bit. So once that egg wash cooks, it kind of gets brown on your pie dish, just clean it up. All right, we're gonna pop this back in the oven for an additional 10 minutes. Hit pause and meet me back here. All right, let's pull our pie crust out of the oven. Ooh, that's pretty. That is pretty. Okay, I'm gonna let this cool. At this point, we also need to turn down our oven to 350, okay? Now for the good stuff, the filling. Let's melt 6 tablespoons of unsalted butter. We're gonna melt this and brown it. Yeah. Brown butter is just gonna add another layer of nuttiness and richness to this pecan pie. Browning butter is just cooking it for an extended amount of time, and you're actually caramelizing the butter. So it's gonna evoke this nutty, almost caramelized flavor. You definitely wanna keep an eye on it at this point because it will burn. We want brown butter, not burnt butter. And I like to continuously stir to break up any of those brown bits that start to form at the bottom of your pot. Make sure your heat is not up too high. Medium-high heat should do it. We're looking for a deep brown color. Starting to smell that butter cook. Whew. What you want to do is take your wooden spoon or a spatula and break up some of those brown spots on the side of your pot. Scraping the bottom. Okay, that looks good to me. It should be a light brown color. Want to turn your heat down just a little bit. All right, we're gonna let our brown butter cool. Move it to your back burner. While that's cooling, let's get started on the rest of our filling. We're gonna add 1 cup of light brown sugar to a bowl. We're gonna add 1 tablespoon of bourbon. If you don't like alcohol, you can skip this step. That bourbon is gonna cut through that sugar and molasses and corn syrup very nicely. 2 teaspoons of vanilla extract. A 1/2 cup of corn syrup. And a 1/4 cup of molasses. Wouldn't be a Southern comfort food classic without molasses. Give it a whisk. Okay. Now we're gonna add in our eggs, 3 eggs. Give it a whisk. And if you've ever had pecan pie, you know that's a really rich and sturdy pie. Adding the egg helps create that consistency. Okay. All right. Now we're going to fold in our pecans. We have 2 cups of pecans. And a 1/2 teaspoon of kosher salt. Okay. Let's fold it in with the wooden spoon. If you have a spatula, you can use that as well. And don't forget about that brown butter. It should have cooled by now. We're gonna add that in. slowly pour it in and fold. Make sure your egg and syrup and the butter and the sugar are all mixed in thoroughly. Okay. Keep folding. All right, that should be good. Let's pour our mixture into our pie crust. How gorgeous is that? Look at that color. Let's pop this in the oven at 350 for 40 to 45 minutes. Hit pause and meet me back here. All right, let's remove our pie from the oven. That smells incredible. Ooh, and it's just as pretty. Look at that. I know you want to dig into this right now, but we got to let this cool, hit pause, and meet me back here when it's cool. Our pie has cooled. Let's start on our bourbon whipped cream. Remember that bowl I told you to have chilled? This is why. We're going to add 1 cup of cold heavy cream. We're going to beat this on high until it forms soft peaks. And if your kitchen is a little warm, you can also chill your beaters in the freezer with your bowl. The reason why we have our bowl chilled and as well as the beaters chilled is because we need to stabilize this whipped cream. We're not adding any stabilizers like a gelatin to it, so the only way that it'll form some type of structure is through being chilled. I like to keep moving the bowl around, getting the sides. And you should see your whipped cream should start to double in size. Okay, let's see, soft peaks, okay? Now we're gonna turn our mixer on low and add in 2 tablespoons of confectioner sugar. I'm gonna add in a 1/4 teaspoon of salt. Your mixer should be on low, okay? Let's stop it. I'm just gonna scrape down the sides, the spatula, and now we're gonna add our bourbon. 1 tablespoon. I mean, bourbon and pecan pie, why not? Okay. Instead of using the mixer, we're gonna fold in our bourbon. And of course, if you're making this for your family or kids, you can omit the bourbon. Okay, the only thing left now is to try our brown butter pecan pie. All right, let's slice our pie. I don't know which side I want to go on. The crust is really thick on this side. I'm gonna go over here. Use a knife. Ooh, did you hear how crispy that pie crust sounds? Oh man. All right, let's plate our pie. Oh man. Look at that. Okay, let's get some of that bourbon whipped cream and top it off. A little dollop on top should do the trick. Let's try it. Makes you want to do a happy dance. Wow, that's good. That brown butter in the pie with the pecans and that brown sugar and the molasses is buttery. It's nutty, it's sweet, and then the whipped cream just cools it off on top and it has a little hint of that salt. This is great.
First, you drain the ricotta. You want to just pop that into a strainer, put it in the fridge, and just let any excess liquid drain out. So next, I make the dough. Very simply, sifting together the dry ingredients: flour, sugar, and salt. Now to that, I'm gonna add exactly 1 tablespoon plus 2 teaspoons of cubed up butter, somewhat soft. And then I just work it into the dry ingredients with my hands, which is fun. I'm also gonna add an egg yolk to this. And then you add the white wine. We want a fully mixed dough, but we don't want to mix too much. Over-mixing anything with flour could lead to a tougher texture. Flatten this out so it just fills out that plastic, and into the fridge we go. Then you focus on the filling. Powdered sugar, a little bit of allspice, and a little bit of cinnamon. You don't realize cinnamon's kind of lurking underneath. And now let's introduce ricotta to its flavor center. For me, ricotta can be kind of dense, so I like to whip a little heavy cream. You can use a mixer or a hand mixer for this to whip the cream. I kind of like to do it by hand. And just fold that into the ricotta cheese, and then add your little textural bits. 1/4 cup of chocolate chips. And then just for a little bit of citrusy brightness, light zests of lemon. Put the ricotta filling into a pastry bag and then get it in the fridge. So I've put 1/4 of canola oil in this heavy bottom pot with the thermometer. We're gonna heat this on a nice low heat until we get 360 degrees. Then you take your dough out that's had its nap. You roll it nice and thin. This is my rule with this. When you think it's thin enough, roll it about 10 or 20 more times. To a thickness between 1/8 and 1/16 of an inch. You want to go pretty thin. So I just use a regular bowl, a few inches in diameter. Cut around it with a knife. Wrap them around the tubes or the cannoli molds. Seal them with just a little bit of egg wash. Flare the edges slightly. Fry them in the tube. Have 2 towels ready. Hold the shell in one and the mold in the other. Slide it right off. You take the filling out of the fridge, fill it from both sides. Dust it simply with powdered sugar, and it's done.
What I'm making for dessert is my ultimate ginger cookie. They're filled with spice, they're moist, they're delicious, and who doesn't like cookies? So the first thing I need is flour. I need 2 1/4 cups of flour. I always just lighten it with a cup and just level it off without tamping it down. And I'm gonna do this all in a sifter. So I'm gonna sift all of these ingredients together, all the flour, spices. 2 1/4. Perfect. 1 teaspoon of baking soda. And next, spices. First, 2 teaspoons of cinnamon. I use really good cinnamon. 1 1/2 of cloves. That's a lot of cloves. They're really spicy. I know people think ginger cookies only have ginger in them, but I love when there are multiple flavors and it just sort of hits you different ways. 1/2 teaspoon of ground ginger and 1/2 teaspoon of nutmeg. And the key is the balance, so that one spice just doesn't stand out. It sort of hits you layer after layer after layer. 1/4 teaspoon of salt, just to make everything taste better. I know it sounds odd to put salt in sweet things, but you put them in savory things to bring out the flavors, and you put them in sweet things for exactly the same reason. And then just put it through the sifter. This is what the sifter is about. It actually mixes it, but if there are any little sort of pieces in the spices or the flour, it takes it out. Okay, that's the dry ingredients. Now for the wet ingredients. So the first thing I need is a cup of brown sugar. All of these ingredients add to the moistness and the spiciness of these cookies. 1/4 cup of oil. Use any kind of flavorless oil that you have. 1/3 cup of molasses. Molasses is actually the concentrated juice of sugar cane, so it's very sweet and very flavorful. You want to choose unsulfured molasses. It's the best quality. Smells good. I'm just going to beat these together for a minute while I get the egg ready. I want the sugar and the oil to be light and fluffy. Okay, next the egg. Got 1 egg. Okay, that's ready. I'm just going to put the egg in. Now I'm going to lower the speed and put all the dry ingredients slowly, just to make sure they get combined well. That's mixed perfectly. And now for the surprise, crystallized ginger. I love crystallized ginger. There's something about the heat and the sweetness of it that it's just fantastic. So I'm going to do 1 1/4 cups of chopped crystallized ginger. Okay, right into the mixture. Give it a little stir, and that's done. Now I'm just going to scoop it out and roll it in sugar and bake it. It's going to be so delicious. I usually use for cookies, I use this ice cream scoop. It ensures that they're all the same size. Roll it in my hands, and then roll it in the sugar. And what this does is make a nice crinkly crust on it, and it makes the whole cookie sparkle. So right on the pan, just flatten it out with your hand. This is gonna be a great dessert. Into the oven, 350 degrees for 12 minutes, and we're gonna have the most delicious, ultimate ginger cookies for dinner. The ultimate ginger cookies